Thank you, Bruno. And thanks everyone for coming back from break. So as Bruno mentioned, my name is Dan Saffer, and I am founder and principal of a company called Kicker Studio, not Knicker Studios, which is an entirely different kind of business altogether. So I'm going to talk about how to design for and with new technologies. And I'm going to start off by talking about what I mean by the word new. When I talk about new technologies, I'm not necessarily talking about the latest technology that's rolling out of research labs. In fact, as Bill Buxton points out here, most of the time that's not very true anyway. That the stuff that is supposedly new has actually been around for quite some time and has slowly rolled out over time. Bill Buxton calls this the long nose of innovation, where it takes time after the invention, really, for traction to be gained by any sort of new technology. And you can see this kind of example here with the last wave of new technology, which was touchscreens, that had been around for about 30 some odd years before they really started to take off. So when I say new, I'm really talking about it could mean all different kinds of new. So it could be new to the world, new to a marketplace, new to a particular industry, new to your particular company, or even simply new to you. Because at some point in your career, you're going to work with some technology that you've never worked with before. And I hope that the rest of this talk helps with helps give you some guidelines on how to do that. And when I talk about technology, I'm not going to talk about any one specific kind of technology. This talk is pretty technology agnostic. I'm going to reference some technology, some new stuff that we've worked on at Kicker Studio. But I want to really talk about the stuff that you're going to encounter a year from now, 2 years from now, stuff that's still kind of rolling out that even I don't know about. And almost everything around us is really technology at one point. We just kind of forget that at one point it was new technology. And so here's some examples of what I think of as kind of the next wave of new technology that's coming out that you're probably going to get your hands on very soon. And all of this stuff is pretty cool, but there's a catch to it, and it's a big catch. And I think Don Norman really identifies it right here. And Don rightly says, I think that he says the technology comes first, but that the need for it comes later. And I think that point of need is where we as designers come in. You know, designers help to give technology meaning. And people are going to, when they encounter this technology, are going to ask, what does it do? How should I use this? And most importantly, they're going to ask, why should I use this? And as designers, I think it's our job to help answer those questions. So I'm going to walk through these four things. I think are the key things for when you're talking about designing for new technology: practical considerations, the expectations that users bring to new technology, personality. How do you imbibe personality into new technology, and meaning? What does new technology really mean? And I'm going to be using a lot of examples from this project that my company did for a company called Kinesta. And Kinesta makes very tiny, very good cameras that are able to detect 3D movement and movement in space really well. And this is a project that we did about a year and a half ago for them. And let me just show you kind of what it is. They asked us to design an entertainment center for them that really showed off how their camera could work in kind of a TV setting.
Seconds. I shattered mine. you sign your name, you'll own my house. I only ask that you never try to contact me for any reason. What do you mean?
So that's basically how it works. It's a simple set of gestures that control the television. And I'll be referencing kind of how we kind of came to this point throughout the talk. So the first thing before we get into kind of more theoretical discussions, I want to talk a lot about kind of practical things to keep in mind. The first is that when you're designing for new technology, you really need to build in some extra time into the schedule. New technologies are like any other kind of large constraint. They always seem to take more time than you expect. And with new technology, you've got the kind of unpredictability factor. There may be bugs that you're not going to know about. There's going to be flaws and constraints that you're not aware of up until the time that you actually start trying to design with it. And so you need to build in some extra time into the schedule. When you're dealing with new technology, you're dealing a lot with two very strong limitations. You've got the limitations of the technology, and then you've got the context that the technology is going to be put into. So you're going to be wrestling with both of those things going forward. And trying to figure out what the technology can't do is really important. And the context could be anything from a website in a digital space to something physical out in the world. And those two things are really a tough challenge. So when we did the Kinesta project, since it was going to be in living rooms, we actually went and looked at people's living rooms, how they watched TV, and we discovered a lot of interesting things simply by doing that, simply by being aware of the context. For example, one of the gestures that we had come up with for mute, for turning off the sound, was to cover your mouth with your hand, like this. But as we saw when we were actually watching people watch TV, they eat and drink while watching TV, so you're doing this all the time. So you don't want that to keep turning the sound off over and over. Likewise, in a living room, you're watching all different sports and those kinds of things, so you don't want, yay, when the football, game is on and have the TV shut off. So these are things that you need to really, so we need to keep the context in mind. The technology limitations for us, and this is why, this is Jennifer Beauvais, one of the other founders of the company. She has gloves on because the cameras at that time couldn't detect fingers very well. It was like you had to wear an oven mitt, basically. So it was kind of reminding us when we were designing to kind of keep that kind of challenge in mind. So the idea is really don't break what's already there. So when it's in a particular environment, you don't want to mess, even though the technology is probably going to disrupt that environment, you need to make sure that you understand that environment before you go into there and start changing it. Prototyping is obviously very important, more important with new technology than with older ones, because until it's up and running, you have no idea what it's going to be like to use it, and you really get a sense of its limitations once you're actually playing with it. And it's fine, really, to start with low fidelity methods, such as paper prototyping and cardboard and kind of Wizard of Oz and man, with the man behind the curtain controlling your prototype as well. With the Kinesta camera, for instance, we didn't have the camera for a certain point, so we were actually controlling the TV simply by using a remote and having people test out gestures with that. With new technology, you may have to help sell it. That's another thing. You're going to have to help sell the technology both internally and outside the company. And this is not only going to help users, it's going to help you trying to understand how the technology would work and what meaning it might have for people that are outside the design team. With Kinesta, we made a set of these kinds of graphics to help the marketing of it as well. Those kinds of things to show off what the gestures might be. We've also found that words matter. The words that you choose to describe a new technology are really important. We've been doing a lot of work with a company called YoLink, YoLink.com. They're they're a company that helps you find better results within search results. But when they came to us, they talked a lot about them being a search company. And what we, as soon as we started thinking about them as more of a find company, then it actually changed how we thought about the product and how we were better able to design for it. Testing, obviously, as with anything new, testing prototypes really recommended. With this one caveat from George Loewy, that great ideas can't be tested, only mediocre ones. So if the technology is really a real departure from what users are used to, there could be some real resistance to the technology, to even having it there. I was once testing a couple years ago, before kind of the big wave of touchscreens came out. I was testing this touchscreen kiosk in a retail space, and one of the men coming in to test got very angry at the touchscreen because he just couldn't quite figure it out, and it was really upsetting. But it was also one of the things that was just disruptive to his expectations. And I think that's really the next part I want to talk about, is kind of users' expectations when working with when approaching something that's new that they haven't done before. Because human beings' brains are kind of set up to expect that things are going to work how they've worked in the past, and so new technology kind of disrupts that whole process. It really messes with our brains. Users are coming there with an expectation of how something's going to happen, and then it doesn't happen, and it might not work the way that they think it should work, or that it really does work. And so keeping this principle in mind is a good idea. This is MAYA, which stands for Most Advanced Yet Acceptable. And it was invented by this guy, Raymond Loewy, who was an industrial designer back in the mid-20th century. And he coined this term, and it's a really good one to kind of keep in mind that you don't want your design to be so radically new that users have no idea where to actually start with it. You need to keep that yet acceptable in mind when you're designing. And this is because humans are really pattern recognition creatures. It's startling to our brains when things don't work or resolve themselves like we're used to. So here's the hard part of this whole talk. So for instance, do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti. Do. Moving on. So what you're really striving for is to create these very discernible patterns quickly, and it's incredibly important with new technology. You want the product, although it's new and exciting, to seem very predictable. And once we find a pattern, we can start to make predictions off that pattern. But if we don't find a pattern, we feel like we're robbed and cheated and we're wrong. It becomes this dissonance for the brain. It causes this tension because we don't know what's coming next. We don't know how this pattern is going to resolve. If you think about me not singing do at the end, some of you even had to sing do back to resolve the pattern. So, do, there you go. So you are now relieved. As Alan says here, you should follow the conventions unless the new alternative is better. So if you can surround your new technology with conventions that users understand, then the technology itself stands a better chance of being adopted. So you can see this very clearly just as one example. Look at how much the early cars actually resembled the carriages that came right before them. And luckily, new patterns do eventually become old patterns. We get used to new technology, and our brains become, used to accepting that. There's a lot of stories now about people going up to their televisions and trying to touch them as though they're touch screens, just because people get used to a pattern. And what you're really looking for is, what we should be striving for when working with new technology is this near immediate creation of the what's known as the of course factor. So as Christian Lindholm here says, a lot of companies are looking for that that wow factor, for their products, when really they should be looking for the of course reaction. And this is especially true of things with new technology. The new technology is going to provide the wow factor. You don't have to dress that up as much. Instead, we don't need to worry about that as designers. Instead, we need to concern ourselves a lot with the use of technology so that it seems obvious and predictable. Well, of course, my cell phone has a touchscreen on it. Of course, that's the correct use of this technology. And some of that is all about affordances. And those of you who saw Justin Davis's talk yesterday know all about affordances. But with new technology, the ability to quickly say, and understand what is it I can do here is essential for adoption for it. This is where affordances come in. What do I push? Can I click this? Can I drag this? How do I get started? Where do I begin? And with the Canesta project, we really strove, even though it was a gestural system and there was really nothing kind of to see, we really strove, and you can see that red circle there on every screen, to put some indication of, hey, if you start making a circle here, it'll start to spin the dial. It's really important to have what I call an attraction affordance as well. And these are things that come out of the arcade games back in the early 80s, where they would play a little bit of the game to let you know, hey, it's okay to come, shoot Space Invaders or whatever it was. So this is actually from antenna design when they, about 10 years ago, or I guess almost 15 years ago now, when they first started rolling out touchscreens for the ticket vending machines in New York City subways. And they thought that everyone there would be used to touchscreens because of ATM machines. But what they found was not everyone there had an ATM card and wasn't used to ATM machines at all. So they created this kind of touch screen. This is the first screen that you see as you walk up to the machine, and it really overcues you, right? Because it's got touch start to begin, a start button. It says touch start. That hand is animated. It points up to the thing, to the button. And the funny thing is, you can press anywhere on the screen and it'll start. But they overcued in order to get people into using the system, to understand that first hurdle just to get into using it. Metaphor is also a really powerful tool with new technologies, and asking yourself things like, what else in the world is this product like? Can really help you come up with a design language and affordances that can really help users understand the technology. I'll pause while you read this sentence. So Amy is talking about this kind of gap between people's worldview and the new technology. And if you've never seen anything like the new technology, our minds kind of flail around looking for something to latch onto, and we get confused. But if you have a metaphor, like the desktop metaphor that we're all very familiar with, it helps the human brain understand these kind of abstract ideas and understand what's going on. And a metaphor that we found is really useful, and one that we used in Canesta is this one, is make it like a toy. Because most people aren't afraid of playing with toys or using toys or experimenting with a toy. It kind of it makes it seem less threatening. It's something new. It's a good kind of go-to metaphor. And as Paul Graham points out here, most people may dismiss what you've made as a toy anyway, and that's been true for almost every kind of major disruptive thing, from personal computers to cars to planes, and you can add Facebook and Twitter to this list as well. It's all things that people consider kind of a toy. The other thing metaphor can really do is help you to bring design languages from other areas that you may not even think about into your particular area. So for example, before he worked at Apple, Jonathan Ive spent time designing kitchen and bathroom accessories. And so he was able to bring the kind of language from there, into the personal computer realm. And it allowed the computers to really take on an entirely different kind of feeling. And that brings me to my next point about personality. It really allowed computers to have more of a personality. So, and if you find that you're giving your product more personality, especially with new technology, users are going to be a lot more forgiving and more interested in it, and they'll become more attached to it as well. So, as designers, we need to think, what's the voice of this technology? Ask yourself, how does this speak to the user? What positive emotion can it make them feel? And one great place for that is actually is error, failure. Failure is a great place to show personality. When you're dealing with more established technology, it's easy to forget about things when you're designing, like error messages and use cases where something bad has really happened. But with new technology, that's not true. Something bad is bound to happen once people start using it. There's going to be all these unexpected errors. And this is really a time where products can show off their personality. And Flickr, which really did this really well, and Flickr used new technology that 4 or 5 technology rounds ago, and it did this very well. Saying stuff like sometimes web services can be a little flaky, or sorry, that didn't quite work. It was able to be very human in its responses. And what I'm really talking about here is this idea of emotion. If we have an emotional connection to the products we use, we're more likely to forgive its faults and experiment with it and keep it for longer. So I always ask what kind of emotion could be generated using this technology, and sometimes that will be partially given by the technology itself, and sometimes it'll be something that the designers have to enhance. And with the enhancement, it's all about the small details. Emotion isn't usually found as much in the functionality itself. It's usually it's in the expression of that functionality. It's in the feedback. It's in the transitions between pieces of functionality, or transitions between content, or those kinds of things. It's in all those very small details that that emotion can really be embodied, and that's the kind of stuff that we as designers really should pay attention to, the small details. And sometimes the technology itself has its own emotional resonances as well, and the context of use definitely too. This is us testing stuff for Kinesta, and as we found, some of the gestures that we had chosen actually had a weird emotional weight of their own. So we had determined that this was going to be the movement for turning the TV off. But people were like, no, that seems angry. Like, I love my TV. I don't want to be angry at my TV. So there's these weird kind of emotional feelings that people have about things that you don't know until you start to really play with it. And one area that I want to really encourage and put a plug in for is sound design. The web almost ruined sound design because every time you went to a site, it would blast music at you, and you'd struggle to turn your sound off and those kinds of things. But I think sound is a really important tool for us as designers to really give personality to our products. Some of the ones that we did for the Kinesta project, things like we actually took that from an actual toy, because we were trying to get a toy kind of sound to it. So that was the sound that we kind of got for when you kind of turned it on. It was that nice kind of like broken string kind of sound. And that was for because the camera could only look at one person at once. So if you waved at it and it looked at you, it would whistle to let you know, hey, I've seen you. Like, hey, good looking. That was the idea. And then just a simple kind of finger snap for select kind of thing. So I think those, just those three kind of examples really give you an idea of kind of the personality we were really trying for. And it's these kind of small details, I think, that really help generate this kind of personality for the product. And last thing I want to talk about is meaning. So with meaning, there's only really two things that can really create super innovative products: technology and meaning. And as designers, we're uniquely poised, I think, to work with both realms. And what Ben Fry says here, so anytime you have a new device, and this can also mean, also apply to website or software or whatever, it doesn't make a lot of sense for people when they first get it. It doesn't fit with what we're currently used to. So what Ben, I think, is saying is that as designers, we have to help make meaning for the new technology. And for me, I think meaning really starts by asking, this question. What's the deepest reason that people would actually use this technology? And this is what Roberto Verganti says in his book, Design-Driven Innovation. And he says that the most powerful kinds of innovation are the kinds where the technology and meaning both change. The technology is so strong that the meaning can't help but change. And designers can really help bring out this kind of hidden meaning from the technology. And one of the ways that you can do that is through beating the bag. And what beat the bag means is Alan Chachanoff, who's a design teacher in New York City, has his students every year do a project where they have to beat the bag. And beating the bag means that they have to redesign things to pick up dog poo on the streets. But the idea is whatever they have to come up with has got to be better than what already exists, which is the little dog bags. So beating the bag is really important. So the question is, for us as designers, what is it that the technology can do better and not just different from what currently exists? And we definitely, when we gave this some thought with the Canesta project, which was all about trying to replace this kind of myriad of things that you could use to control your TV with instead just a set of gestures. You don't have to go look for a remote or a keyboard or those kinds of things. You can simply use a gesture. And that was our way of beating the bag. How you go about doing this is really capturing a good way to do it is to capture meaning in design principles. What Peter calls kind of the experience principles. Here's some of the ones for the Canesta project. Be able to use it on a date. We didn't want it to be anything that was too embarrassing. That you wouldn't want. You don't want to be embarrassed in your living room. You want this thing to have a kind of helping you out feeling, not I have to do these crazy gestures to turn my TV on feeling. And then being as lazy as possible, kind of being able to work this thing while laying on the couch. TiVo, which Peter also talked about, this idea of these different. It's entertainment, it's TV, it's video. Kind of trying to position a new technology, the digital video recorder, still within that TV realm, but something that could seem very computer-like. Instead, they really wanted it to still feel like television. So we've gone through some practical considerations. Leave yourself some extra time. Make sure that you're building in points for failure. Make sure you're understanding that. Be aware of users' expectations. They're coming at it from their old kind of expectations, and the new technology may not work like that anymore. So you have to kind of be aware of that. One of the ways to help that is to give your new technology, give your product some personality, and definitely give it meaning. Give it meaning for people's lives. I just want to end with this this bit by Jack Schultz. You know, some people say that design is about solving problems. Obviously, designers solve problems, so do dentists. But design is about cultural invention. Yes, Jack. Yes. And new technologies, I think, you know, really allow us to be these kind of inventors of culture. And I hope that when the chance comes for you to become an inventor of culture, that you will seize that chance. So that is my talk. Thank you very much. I'm supposed to move over here for questions. Ooh. Or lay on the couch.
Take a nap.
Yeah, wake me up when they're quick. Are there any questions? Anything? Is that back there?
Hi.
Hi.
I've got a question. You talk about personality and adding personality into the product. What's your thoughts on how that then affects the brand and how that consequently gets marketed to people? Because you're defining a personality which ultimately people are going to embrace as part of the brand. So what are you doing to actually start defining the brand of your product?
Well, sure. I mean, first, if there is a kind of company umbrella brand, I mean, there are going to be characteristics that the company has. And the question is then, what fits under that kind of overall umbrella? What fits alongside the kind of company line? Now, the question then becomes one of how far can we stretch that? You know, does it fit an idea of the technology being kind of playful or toy-like, or is it a very serious? Is it a financial services, company, and we are all about the serious? So those things do affect the kind of overall personality that you can imbibe with something new. It's just it does become a question of how you can figure out kind of the characteristics of the company and how they match to what you're proposing. And if it doesn't, then you're going to have to move one or the other, right? I mean, either the company brand is going to have to stretch to incorporate this, or what you have is going to have to fit. I don't know if that's did that answer the question?
Yeah, I just think it's quite interesting that as user experience people, we can actually start to influence branding. And how
No, I
products
think
are perceived.
that's definitely true. I mean, look at how much the new Apple line has really changed Apple's brand. I mean, it was, while still kind of, it definitely stretched it. It just continued it from, they looked at kind of what the core things were about being human and innovation and those kinds of things and being really intelligent, and stretched it all the way to, the new iPad and stuff like that.
Thanks.
Anyone else? Okay, I guess I will turn it over to Bruno and Donna.